Hello, hello, welcome, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. Please type in the chat where you're joining from today and how many people are watching with you. And if you are able, please acknowledge the native lands which you occupy. I'd love to see you guys fill this room, so go ahead. I see Liz is here from Westchester, the Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. I see Janice is here from Crestwood, Potawatomi. I see Jen is here as well from our team, OEC. Anybody that can hear me, go ahead and let me know where you're coming in from and how many are watching with you. Great. Let's just see you guys sort of fill in. I know we have anticipating a big crowd tonight. Just love to hear your voices fill this room. Once again, if you're just joining us, type in the chat where you're joining from today, how many are with you, and if you're able, the native land which you occupy. You could acknowledge that. We have Taylor from Minnesota with another person. Thanks, Taylor. Timothy from Florida and Seminole Territory. Patricia from Chicago. Jim in Oak Park. Kayla in San Francisco. Olone. Brian in Chicago, just him. Christine from New Jersey. Kai in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. Mohican. Amber in Chicago. Great. Let's keep those coming on in. Love to see your voices filling this room. Nice to see you, Samya. Thank you. Terry in Stockbridge, Mass. Christine, Lenape Land in New Jersey. Wonderful. Thanks so much. I'm just going to move us forward, but keep on checking in. Love seeing you fill this room. I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, the Executive Director of One Earth Collective, which produces the One Earth Film Festival. Welcome to this festival screening event. We hope it will provide us all with rich opportunities for learning, a brave and safe space for important conversations, and a way to move from inspiration to action. We could not do this work without the support of our sponsors and partners, so thank you to Tom Bassett Dilly Architects and Riley, Unglaub, and Burke at Merrill Lynch. So I'd like to pause right now and just give Bill Riley from our continuing sponsor at Riley, Unglaub, and Burke a moment to give you all a short welcome. Bill.
Good evening. Again, this is Bill Riley. My team and I are happy to continue as sponsors in this 11th One Earth Film Festival. I've been involved now in the film festival for 7 years because I believe these films have a unique ability to not only educate, but motivate people. This year's theme is Turn the Tide, and I'm proud of what we're doing at Merrill Lynch and Bank of America to turn the tide on climate change. We were ranked the #3 firm in the world in the Forbes Change the World rankings. And I'm happy to say that as of 2 years ago, we are carbon neutral and continue to reduce our footprint by adding solar panels on top of our buildings and even ATMs. As you watch this film tonight, I hope that you too are thinking of things that you can do to turn the tide on the Earth's environmental problems. One action idea I would like to share is to use your money. I think we all want to be good stewards with our money. We want to spend it wisely and support businesses that share our values. It should be the same when you save and invest. For 25 years, my team is focused on sustainable investing, also known as green investing or ESG investing, but it's basically making sure that your investments are aligned with your values. And there's two good reasons to do this. First is you benefit because companies that make good decisions in the areas of the environment, social issues, and corporate governance outperform their peers on virtually every financial metric that matters. Simply put, green investing can outperform and make more money and usually do it with less risk. The second reason is that the Earth benefits. We are bringing about real change. Through shareholder activism, our investors have engaged hundreds of companies over the last year. And I'd like to highlight two from the last couple months, which is securing the first pesticide reduction target by a major food producer at Lamb Weston and working with Waste Management on their first ever environmental justice audit, looking at the locations where they locate their facilities and how it impacts the communities around the facility. If you'd like to learn more, you can find us as well as information on other sponsors on the One Earth webpage. by clicking the support tab. And with that, I think I'm turning it to you, Vince.
Actually, thank you so much, Bill. What a great message. We really appreciate your ongoing sponsorship, which helps us make all of our events free to folks. So, really thank you. Just another last quick note before we move forward. If your circumstances allow, please donate to support our nonprofit year-round screening events at One Earth. We also have youth programs and more, and you can learn about that also at oneearthfilmfest.org. Thank you.
We gratefully welcome you to One Earth's 11th festival season, and we invite you to join us in turning the tide on our climate crisis. The festival uses the power of film to create a sea change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like racial, social, and economic justice. This year, we've adapted a hybrid format where all screenings are virtual, with some accompanying in-person events taking place in the Chicago area. Whether live or virtual, we remain committed to our unique model of gathering and community to raise awareness of the issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. A powerful image and call to collective action in light of this year's festival theme, Turn the Tide, are the words of Japanese writer Ryunosuke Satoru. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Our event will take place in 4 parts. Soon, we'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a rich discussion after the film. Then, we'll watch the film together. After the film, we'll unpack its themes in a facilitated dialogue with our panelists. Please use the chat to share your thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These suggested actions come from our panelists and action partners. I'd now like to make a few brief acknowledgments. The first is that, as we reframe narratives around justice, environment, and equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we acknowledge the many filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. Thank you. Your wisdom and experiences help us spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. The second acknowledgement is that One Earth Collective is based in Chicago, the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and home to many other tribes, including today, peoples from over 100 tribal nations. Despite this, there are currently no federally recognized tribes in Illinois, due in part to colonization, relocation, and genocide. One Earth sustains its commitment to presenting films that center Indigenous stories and voices. We believe that beyond acknowledging the native lands we each occupy, we must lift up Indigenous voices and support the work of First Nations groups. If you're in the Chicago area, please support the important work being done by the American Indian Center Chicago, the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative, Chi Nations Youth Council, and others. And watch for the Field Museum exhibition, Native Truths, Our Voices, Our Stories, co-curated with collaborators from more than 100 tribes, opening this May. A third acknowledgement is that shared agreements can help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe the following agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect, engage your active listening, use I statements, and get comfortable with your own story. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people that this is happening. Amplify these voices and be a part of the community we're building here together. The hashtags for the festival are hashtag OEFF 2022 and hashtag Turn the Tide. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to this really great screening and this exciting conversation that we are about to begin. My name is Vincent Gomez, and I will be your MC and facilitator this evening. Here in the Chicago community, I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Community Engagement for Lincoln Park Zoo. What inspires me to get up out of bed every morning is the fact that our team is committed to advancing equitable access to nature and environmental education throughout the Chicago region. We do this through co-design and collaboration with community stakeholders, working to amplify the voices of residents and our partners so that we can realize places and programs where humans and wildlife thrive. Now, as we begin the 11th season of the One Earth Film Festival and continue tonight with an amazing, thought-provoking conversation around the film 2040, The Regeneration, I want you to consider how you have enjoyed films in the past. We often watch movies and then walk out of the theater without really reflecting on what we have seen, how we felt about it, or what implications that film might have for our own lives. Today, we are going to be joined by knowledgeable, committed panelists who are going to help us unpack the themes we explore in this film and connect you to other opportunities to continue moving the needle and supporting grassroots activists and other stakeholders at multiple levels of scale, trying to affect change for the better as we address our global climate crisis. We look forward to having you participate, enriching the dialogue with your reflections and questions in the chat. We look forward to exploring ways that we can take related action together. Next, we are going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to briefly introduce them by name and acknowledge their organization, but stick around for our conversation after the film, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about these amazing leaders. First, I want to acknowledge Ms. Alicia Ponce, representing APMonarch Architecture. Next, I also want to acknowledge and welcome Jamie Ponce, Executive Director of Civic Infrastructure Collaborative. We are also joined by Ms. Angela Tovar, Chief Sustainability Officer, representing the City of Chicago, and also Dr. Jifunza Wright-Carter, Executive Director and Founder of Black Oak Center. As I mentioned, we will learn more about them after the film. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our film, 2040, The Regeneration. Motivated by concerns about the planet that his 4-year-old daughter would inherit, award-winning director Damon Gameau embarked on a global journey to meet innovators and changemakers in the areas of economics, technology, civil society, agriculture, education, and sustainability. This journey is central to the premise of the documentary, 2040, a story of hope that looks at the very real possibility that humanity could reverse global warming and improve the lives of every living thing in the process. It is a positive vision of what could be instead of the dystopian future that we are so often warned about. The film is 92 minutes long. Stick around afterwards for a conversation, but in the meantime, enjoy. An incredible film with so many poignant messages, scenes, and calls to action. We want to take a moment to invite all of you watching from home to transition and get ready for a very rich, thought-provoking discussion that is about to begin. I want to start by just posing a rhetorical question. Are you ready to play your part on behalf of the regeneration? I was struck by this film's power to reframe the power we currently wield, the opportunities that we have at hand to recreate the future that we, our children, and our children's children deserve to inherit. The quote that imagination, innovation, creativity are characteristics inherent in all people of every age, background, and ability was particularly inspiring and reminds us that we all have a role and a place to play in addressing these comprehensive challenges. I think more importantly for me, this film was a reminder that to inherit a healthy and thriving environment, it's a human right, and that we must organize around it and fight in order to protect. But perhaps even deeper, it's a story that reminds us that the story of humanity is ours to tell, and that the future is still yet to be written. So how will we, those who lived through perhaps the most critical moment in our history, how do we wish to be remembered through the ages? Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching 2040, the Regeneration. We're ready to get started in our post-film facilitation, and we're going to start out by turning it over to you. Please take a moment to enter into the chat examples of scenes, people, or lines in the film that stood out most for you. Our tech team working hard behind the scenes is going to curate your responses and make sure that those of us on the panel will read them. I will shout them out, but as you work on populating those, I'm just going to take a second in a moment of personal privilege to share some of the lines and scenes and quotes that stood out most to me. I think I want to start with a comment that the director made, which was that the more he learns, the more he realizes just how hard it actually is to do the right thing about climate in a system that was built by and for fossil fuels. Some of the stats the film used to back that up is that there's been a 400% increase in carbon emissions since the start of the Industrial Revolution, and that oceans are more than 30% more acidic than they were 150 years ago. I was struck by the comment in the quote that we rent our home, planet Earth, from future generations. To me, that's what this film is all about. Pushing our soils beyond their capacity to organically produce food while simultaneously destroying marine ecosystems. It's going to result in the loss of our civilization. And that was a stark reminder. We're starting to see some comments come in, and I just want to encourage all of you to continue adding to the chat. On a positive note, I also want to acknowledge some uplifting quotes. And one that really stood out to me was spoken by a child, by a leader. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. How we present data to learners matters. If we present it as a story, or even just using creative, interactive visualization tools, this film has revealed that we do and we can see boosts in empathy and we statements in young people. This is critical. Another key aspect that was mentioned was the imperative that we empower women and girls to be a part of this solution. To me, this really speaks to intersectionality. The intersectionality of the climate issue reveals that climate and environmental justice is social justice, is racial justice, is health justice, and gender justice. And that the filmmaker could reflect and say that the cascading effects of this realization could potentially be greater than any other solution that he had discovered, really speaks to the imperative, again, that we have right now to take action to advance equity in education, income, and health across the globe by ensuring that women and young ladies have access to the resources and the opportunities that they deserve. So let's take a moment now to highlight some of the scenes, lines, and images that stood out to all of you. And also, I will encourage you as we move forward, feel invited to add your name and the city or country that you're viewing from to your comment. Deidre comments, educate girls. Helen Quinn mentions the scenes about educating and empowering women were so impactful. I felt it too. Jacob mentions, too bad for the hot dog kid. Janice, thank you for your comment. The smart car, was it electric, hydric, or what? Another great comment. Thank you, David and Julie from Worcester, Ohio. A child, when I eat bacon, I feel kind of sad. I feel guilty as well, so I can relate. Kevin mentions the film was fantastic. Talked about the real problems, but provided a realistic path to an improved future. Thank you, Heather and Carrie for your comment. Marine permaculture. As someone with a background in botany, all I can say is yes. Also, Cheryl Mayo comments, I love the part about regenerating the ocean. Seaweed, who knew? Beth mentions, we export the same amount of food that we import. Wild, isn't it? All right, we have time for a couple more. Right now, we also want to mention, Beth commented, Bangladesh went from no power straight to solar power. A really compelling example of how quickly these types of transformations can happen. All right, we have time for about another minute of comments, and they keep pouring in. Folks, please continue sharing with us what scenes, people, or lines in the film stood out to you or were the most memorable. Kevin mentions, would like to see the US government work with new housing developments to set up a few microgrids in new construction areas. Well, we see what happens with a decentralized power grid, Kevin. I would like to see that as well. Mary Susan Chen mentions, women's natural nurturance, cooperative, and creative instincts are essential for our future. Well stated. Jim comments, the quote, we already have everything to make the changes we need. Hear, hear. And lastly, our final comment from Donna Marie, independence from big utilities. That's something that we need as well. Well, thank all of you for sharing these initial thoughts. There are some of you that we were not able to share, but please continue participating with us and engaging with us in the chat as we move forward. Our next segment now will begin, and we're going to bring back our panelists and reintroduce them one by one. The first I want to welcome back to our screen is Miss Alicia Ponce. Alicia Ponce is the founder and principal of APMonarch, a Chicago-based female and Latina-owned architecture firm. With work throughout the Midwest and Latina America, the mission of APMonarch is to design healthy environments, creating buildings that look good, feel good, and perform great. Thank you, Alicia, for being with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Next, we're going to introduce and welcome to our screen, Mr. Jamie Ponce. No relation. Jamie is the executive director of the Civic Infrastructure Collaborative, a nonprofit organization that drives public value from core urban infrastructure through cross-sector collaboration and technology-enabled solutions. Jamie, it's a pleasure having you on the panel.
Thanks for inviting us. Great to be celebrating the 11th One Earth Film Festival.
Celebrating in style, 11 seasons and strong. Thanks, Jamie. Next, we're going to welcome to our panel, Ms. Angela Tovar. Angela has worked as an urban planner, nonprofit manager, and climate and environmental justice advocate for over 15 years. In 2020, Angela was appointed as the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago by Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Angela has committed to centering the City of Chicago's climate and sustainability agenda on equity, focused on mitigating environmental harms in Chicago's most overburdened and underserved communities. Angela, thank you for being here and thank you for your continued leadership.
Thank you so much, Vincent. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone.
And finally, we are very proud to welcome Dr. Jifunza Wright-Carter. Dr. Jefunza, or affectionately we'll refer to her as Dr. J, is a family physician and organic regenerative farmer. With over 15 years experience of grassroots community activism, she is part of the co-founding family of the Black Oaks Center non-for-profit. Its mission, to facilitate communities being resilient. At the urging of her son, who was 8 at the start of their journey, the family made a pact to personally reduce their carbon footprint and support others to do the same. The Carters left a carbon-intense city life in Chicago over 10 years ago to live in a low-carbon state of life on the 40-acre campus in Pembroke Township, Illinois. Dr. J, thank you for being with us.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, folks at home, we want to again encourage you to engage with us in the chat by sharing questions for our panelists. Our tech team will curate them and we will weave them into the conversation as we move forward. We have about 25 minutes for our conversation, so let's go ahead and get started. To start things off, I want to center us on one of the opening premises of the film, was that this film was an exercise in fact-based dreaming. This is a question for all of our panelists. Would you be able to share examples of facts from the film or from your work in particular that inspire you to believe that the transformation we need to achieve is attainable? I'm going to go ahead and pass that to Jamie. Jamie, can you get us started?
Sure, happy to jump in. Right off the bat, it strikes me that 2040, for people who are climate activists and planners and policymakers, 2040, 2050, 2025 even, those are scary dates because we set ambitious goals, whether it's for GHG emission reduction, for vehicle electrification, for clean energy transitions, oftentimes a long time ago, having no real idea of how we were going to hit those goals. And suddenly the future is now. Today is yesterday's tomorrow. But I think one of the facts that struck me and even the framing of the film was that we have tools today that can carry us forward to those goals. City of Chicago is more than halfway to meeting its Paris Climate Agreement goals. We have tools like microgrids and solar and electric vehicles to carry us a good deal of the way towards these ambitious goals. I was also struck by the fact that the film depicted the future not as a cartoon and not as a fictitious place, but it overlaid those future scenes on our current environment. And one of the facts that I'm always mindful of is whether we're looking to 2025 or 2040 or 2050 or beyond, we actually have the majority of the physical infrastructure already that will be with us in these future days. It's not about cloud or homes and buildings in the sky by 2040. The majority of our building stock of 2040 is already here. The majority of our roads and transportation infrastructure is already here. It's really a question of how we use it. How can we develop and implement additional technology and uses and policies and collaboration to make the most of what we already have.
Thanks, Jamie. And continuing on with making the most of what we already have, I'm not sure if there's anyone who knows best on how to maximize all resources at the home level, as well as working with community than Dr. J. Dr. J, would you be willing to share with us what are some of the facts or what are some of the experiences that you've had that inspire you to believe that we can make this change?
Believe it or not, I think the pandemic has definitely renewed my faith and belief and trust that we can actually do this. Because a number of these issues, and the reality is we went into the pandemic with constrained resources worldwide. And, all the things that we've been through, it was 2 years ago that all of us got pushed in and, held up in our homes, wherever we were. And so it really helped us to touch our humanity. It helped us to rethink a lot of things. And hopefully, if we're in this lull time, we'll be able to, begin to redefine. So I think this 11th year One Earth Film Festival, this particular movie was timely, in terms of us, seeing what it is that we want to have happen and feeling and knowing the power of us as people, to really make those changes happen.
Indeed, the pandemic challenged us all to rethink, redefine, but also redesign how our communities connect and the opportunities that we curate as residents to connect with one another. I want to bring in Alicia with your expertise in the architecture field, using design as a tool for social transformation. What insights inspire you that design can be a part of the solution, or is part of the solution as well?
Yes, I'm going to try to contain myself because there's so much I want to say. Starting with the fact that, the director was talking about carbon, right? Carbon is a fact that it creates heat, right? And it has been creating heat at a very fast pace. But to look at it in a positive way is that carbon is also a building blocks to who we are, how we're made and how nature is made. And so we are in the architecture world, in the design world, we are looking to sequester that carbon and look at what our embodied carbon footprint is, because I'm willing to bet all of us are inside buildings right now, indoors. And so knowing that we're indoors, most of the time of our lives, how do we use these buildings? How do we design these buildings so that they use less carbon? How could we be more efficient? So we're looking at, the design industry. We are in a very pivotal stage right now where we can be climate change, heroes and sheroes, right? Because buildings create 40% of carbon emissions. We're in them all the time. In Chicago, they create 70% of carbon emissions. But we have the tools and resources to be able to design in a way that reduces those carbon emissions.
Exactly, but Alicia, you remind me of a metaphor, perhaps, that if the built environment is the soil and our residents are the seeds, that perhaps our policies and the leadership of our elected leaders and officials serves as, dare I say, a fertilizer or a catalyst to drive additional growth. I want to bring in Angela. And Angela, talk to us a little bit about what is the city of Chicago, doing to put fertilizer on these great ideas and initiatives that are being uplifted by community voices.
Yes. Thank you, Vincent. I will start. I want to touch on a moment that really struck me in the film. And that was when the filmmaker was riding in the airplane, and he noted the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, the amount of emissions, right? The amount of carbon that's emitted from just one plane ride. And then he also, picked up his plastic cup to just note, right, how the fossil fuel economy is just embedded in every aspect of our life, right? And I think that was an important moment to note, even though, he was really looking at highlighting and uplifting all of the ways in which we can transition. I think it was just an important moment to acknowledge how much we have to overcome, but it's not impossible, right? And that was my takeaway from that moment. And I think similarly, Chicago is an old industrial city, right? We have the second largest industrial economy in the country. We are very much a city that was built, wasn't built, but grew during the Industrial Revolution and beyond, right? And we're an old Rust Belt city, and we, for a long time, have relied on fossil fuel-based extractive economies. But I think that what we're seeing here, just even with the expertise in this space, Dr. Jefunza, Alicia, Jamie, and so many other leaders across the city are demonstrating how successful we can be as a city if we embrace regenerative economies across the board in our different sectors. And it doesn't have to be limited to just urban agriculture, although that presents an abundance of opportunity for our communities. Alicia is demonstrating how that would work for us in the built environment, which is, as she mentioned, our largest sources of emissions. Jamie shows us every day how we can incorporate tech and really work at that intersection to solve our climate solutions. I think that for us as a city, we and Jamie noted this in his remarks, the technology is here. We don't have to wait for new innovative solutions. Chicago signed on to the Climate Action Plan the Paris Climate Agreement almost 5 years ago at this point, and people want to see action. And my goal every single day, our goal as members of this administration are to move with urgency, but also equitably, right? To ensure that we are helping to foster the green, the clean energy economy, the regenerative economy, the green economy for the people of Chicago. And I will say one thing to note, especially today, is that we today released our 2022 draft climate action plan. So this is the first climate action plan. I do want to note we have seen sustainability plans in previous administrations which have, highlighted various ways in which we can continue our progress on climate action. But for the first time since 2008, the city of Chicago today released a draft climate action plan, and it's draft because we want to allow for one more round of engagement with our leaders in our communities, particularly those who are on the front lines of climate change, and many others to weigh in on the goals before we make them permanent.
It's critical that we are recognizing, as you've mentioned, Angela, that parts of the current system that are dysfunctional or maybe aren't working to the extent that they could yet are also part of the solution. And you mentioned the importance of uplifting voices from the grassroots and from the community. I want to start this next question with going back to Dr. Jefunza. What is an aspect of the climate crisis that you work on, whether it's with regenerative agriculture or just within community, that can be reframed as an action opportunity rather than a barrier to success? We know messaging and how we frame is really important. So how do you engage with that question in your work?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. We currently have been peeling back the rich history and legacy of Pembroke Township as a historic Black farming community, the largest Black farming community north of the Mason-Dixon line. And what it is that we're working on now is actually restoring the local food system networks that were created well over 70 years ago, and acknowledged a deep relationship between the urban, suburban, and rural areas of in and around and just outside of Chicago. This is literally a 60 to 70 mile radius that we're speaking about. And our vision is to be able to reclaim Black farmland here in Pembroke Township, because the beautiful thing is the Black farmers of Pembroke were practicing regenerative agriculture long before it was given a title. And so literally we have a rich ecological environment here that's been stewarded for well over 200 years. When the Potawatomi were forced to go to the reservations, the level of maintenance and care has still been very high. And we want to see Black farming and regenerative, sustainable practices exist in perpetuity here. And so we're very excited about that. Also with the prodding of, many of you may know of the NICOR gas line installation attempt You know, the community is awakening and declaring their environmental stewardship, and want very much to be one of the first communities in the state of Illinois to implement the clean energy future possibilities and models. And so we're working on community economic development at a very inclusive level with as many of our residents as we possibly can to re-envision and reimagine. So this movie was very, very helpful in the sense of this is an extremely poor community that once we would be able to do something like it's being done in Bangladesh, it could transfer this entire community, and we could be well on our way to transforming, supporting, healing this place, and being a contribution to our surrounding areas.
Dr. J, I think you remind all of us that healing really is what this is about, but also that healing requires collaboration. I want to come back to the topic of environmental and climate justice in just a moment, but let's go and hear from Jamie as well. Jamie, the work of your nonprofit also is focused on driving innovation through tech and collaboration. How does your work, in your view, exist in conversation with the work that Dr. Jefunza is describing?
Sure, absolutely. Our mission at the Civic Infrastructure Collaborative is driving public value from core urban infrastructure through technology and collaboration. And our playbook was actually on display through some of the movie and in some of the other panelists' comments, where we take physical assets and we look at them as opportunities to create the 21st century infrastructure that we need. Our organization and the collaborations that we foster are based on the idea that 21st century infrastructure has to do and be more than it was designed to do and be, and that people, organizations, and technology are the keys to unlocking that value. Like Dr. Jefunza, our approach to innovation and collaborative technology implementation doesn't start with the tech. We don't want to be the hammer looking for nails. We start with needs, social needs, community needs, individual needs. And we look to define problems that are often hard to define or that different people and organizations define differently. We try to create common ground there. And then we bring in the tools to solve the problems at hand. And the opportunities are enormous. I mean, we've seen some of them tonight, turning buildings into power plants, turning fallow fields into carbon repositories. We've looked at ways to turn sewer systems into early warning systems for public health as we've begun to do COVID sampling in sewers. But the innovation stories are impressive and inspirational. But without the people and the communities who need to be served by our infrastructure and by the innovation, in the absence of that community engagement and the absence of that relevance, the technology won't have a fighting chance to achieve that potential.
So drilling in on this aspect of community engagement and co-design and co-participation in planning, I would love to hear from Alicia, from a standpoint of a designer, from a standpoint, of a builder, how does breaking down what do breaking down barriers look like for you when it comes to engaging with community in the design process?
I mean, the film was so good in hitting on all of the important topics of green building and climate change and connecting the dots. And that's what we like to do, is recognizing how everything has a co-benefit, right? To everyone here, when we work together, there is a co-benefit. And really recognizing the embracing diversity of thought, right? We also do community engagement, and a lot of us at my firm, we're bilingual. And so like one of the things is being able to communicate in the language. For us, it's in Spanish, in the community in which something is being planned, is built, and really communicate, be that bridge of communication. And as architects, we can, we like to say we can speak architecture and we can speak Spanish, right? So we can marry those ideas and really have a good understanding of how to develop a good idea. And then just bring in recognizing all of the co-benefits, connecting the dots. How can we provide job training during this planning, right? How can we plan for the future? And education is huge, right? When we're planning in such a way, is that clarity and transparency of message, consistency of message is what we do, especially when planning, whether it's, working with the city or the state and in a community or a municipality.
And also, I've been listening and hearing that we're talking a lot about ideas. We're talking a lot about amplification. We're talking a lot about developing consistency, both probably in strategy as well as in tactics to lead us towards success. Angela, in what ways is the city of Chicago amplifying the efforts of leaders like we have on this panel?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share some of our work. And this, I think what you have heard described is very much part of what I would say is a approach that we have fully embraced at the Mayor's Office Sustainability Team. I think that what we understand and what we value is recognizing that our frontline leadership, has the vision for the future, and we need to really let community lead when it comes to climate solutions. And so that has been a value, especially for me as someone coming from the environmental justice movement into the public sector. That is very much a value that I hold close to my heart as I'm leading the city, and have, brought folks onto the team that also share that value. And I believe that we have explored new and innovative approaches to really uplift the expertise of our leadership. And I will give you one example, and that is we have a building decarbonization working group. So a group of people, Alicia being one of them, that are working with us to think about that number that she provided in her remarks at the beginning. 70% of our carbon emissions comes from our built environment. Our greenhouse gas emissions comes from our built environment. And we, even ahead of the climate action plan, know, right, that we need to address that. But we also have to do that equitably and acknowledge that there are historic inequities in our built environment that allow for conditions that exist unfairly for low-income communities and Black and Brown communities in the city of Chicago. And so, we can address decarbonization through design or redesign or retrofits, but we needed to think about that through an equity lens and invite people who would not traditionally be the people that cities would bring together, right? People beyond the design community, people beyond the architecture community or the engineering community, and really broaden the table of partners working together to co-design those recommendations. And that's been a year-long effort of, yes, designers and engineers, absolutely, but people who really share that value and want to work with community leaders and, neighborhood organization leaders to come together to solve our climate challenges. And so we are gearing up to release that set of recommendations here in the spring, and we're very excited about that. And that's just one way that we're moving toward more co-design opportunities and more ways to work collaboratively with our really robust network of community leaders who are advancing climate solutions in the city.
Angela, we recognize that setting a big table is an important first step, but there are many entities, many stakeholders that have been at the table for many years, and we would like to see a change in their behavior. I want to bring in a question from the audience. We'll start with you, and then I would like also to hear from the rest of our panel. But how do we get buy-in and collaboration on implementing these types of community-driven ideas at scale? And specifically, what kinds of roles must our corporations and our public institutions play in advancing these community-defined priorities?
And we're starting with me, Vince. I just want to clarify. Okay.
We'll start with you, and then we'll take it to the rest of the panel.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I have a perfect answer for how to, move cities and corporations to embrace community-led solutions, but I will say that it is completely changed our approach to climate innovation in the city of Chicago. And I would say, as a best practice, I hope that we can model how much closer to regenerative systems we are building because we are working collaboratively with communities. I think that our climate action plan in particular, which again, the draft was released today, really speaks to co-benefits that our communities need now more so than ever, and was driven by a very thorough process where we had multiple conversations with community leaders, where we had town halls with residents, where we surveyed folks to say, not only how do we draw down carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, but how are you feeling? And how can we build a system that supports you? What are you most concerned about? And we heard things like, I'm making tough decisions right now because my utility bills are high. Or, I wish I could access fresh food sources. Or, I'm really worried about air quality in my community. And so our plan now, the climate action plan that we are releasing, highlights those co-benefits of, circular systems, of, electrification of our buildings and our transportation network, of, enabling more urban agriculture, advancing or building a more robust tree canopy. All of these solutions that are coming out of this are very much about people and communities as they are about emissions reduction. And so moving away from this very high level technical process of this is our plan and we're centered on reduction versus, we want to build holistic communities, to me is a best practice. So I hope that we can continue to demonstrate the value of working collaboratively with our leaders, and that more people understand that we are not going to get to where we need and getting there equitably unless we are working in coordination with folks in our community who are leading the way.
Dr. J, I want to take this over to you. Your work is really focused, as you've mentioned, on uplifting historically disenfranchised communities, especially as it relates to farming and as it relates to health equity. What would you like to see from our public institutions and corporations to continue advancing the initiatives that your team is a part of?
Well, the first thing that I want to acknowledge is that what I've learned over the past year is that it's so important for the grassroots people, just the plain old ordinary people, to just get up and declare, that we must move forward. If we're to see a 2040 that we saw in this movie, it'll be because the people said so. And that's what it is that will inspire and influence and coerce our politicians and our leaders. And so what I've learned in this fight to keep this place as environmentally pristine as possible is that we've got to go into these relationships with each other first and foremost. We've got to be able to see what it is that people want. We've got to be able to share visions and, mount that determination. So I think I can't stress that enough. And then I think the most important thing that I'm still learning is, our politicians, they're people too. And so us being able to continue to access our compassion and our humanity and, giving and taking advantage of any and all opportunities, so that we all can share a similar vision, including them, and perhaps even change values.
And I'm glad you mentioned the importance of values in this conversation. And I do want to make sure we hear from our last two panelists on this question, but in, I would say, 30 seconds or less for each of you, Jamie as well as Alicia, how is your work intersectional with this question of reimagining and redefining values? How is your work really inspiring and connecting people to think differently about their future?
Well, for me, it's, our tagline is designing healthy environments. And as I mentioned, we're indoors all of the time, most of the time. And who wouldn't want a healthy environment? Who wouldn't want clean air? Who wouldn't want clean water? Right. And why? And we believe that everyone has the right to a space that brings comfort and joy. And who wouldn't want that? So to me, those values are ingrained in what we do, because it just seems that it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also it feels good, right? And to my colleagues who are in the design industry, I say, if you're not building in this way, what are you waiting for? Because it can be done. It can be done. And I think, just to touch upon your buy-in, I think buy-in happens at different scales for different people. So 30 seconds, there you go.
It's so hard. It's such a juicy topic for us to dive into. But Jamie, we'll leave you with the last word on this.
Sure. I love to end with this idea of values to carry us forward. I mean, for so long, the climate movement or social justice movements and other related activities have sort of been permeated by this idea of constraint and sacrifice and barriers. And I think one of the values of this movement that's really gaining momentum is the idea of framing a climate future in terms of opportunity and abundance. We saw that in the film. We heard from that girl who was talking about rocket boots, not just because she wanted to fly around, but then she went a step further and said, I want to invent them. I mean, and that was great, because not only was she imagining a different future from what we might have feared, she's finding a place for herself and an upside and a way to have impact in it. And I think as we consider community engagement, as we consider cross-sector collaboration and innovation and technology, really framing in terms of abundance and how can we add value for communities and people and institutions and economic development, in ways that really make that future one that we all want to be part of and actually want to live in.
Well, with that, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for participating and enriching all of our lives with this really stimulating discussion. We're going to move forward. We're not done with our panelists, folks, but we are going to move into our action round. A key value, speaking of the One Earth Film Festival, is to screen top thought documentary style films aimed at connecting communities and individuals with action opportunities to move the needle locally as well as globally. So with our next segment, we are going to begin with a quote from the National Poet Laureate of the United States, Amanda Gorman, who called us to action in her poem, Earthrise. There is no rehearsal. The time is now, now, now. Earth, pale blue dot, we will fail you not. So as a final question, let's all take a few minutes to turn to this topic of action. Can each of you as our panelists please share some ideas for what actions can people take to be a part of the solution? I encourage you to think about actions anyone can take, or drill in a little bit more specifically to actions communities, organizations, governments, or companies can take. We're going to start off with Alicia.
Yes, real quick. It's little steps, right? And for us to how you can measure impact at a home, just like, the director was doing in his film, is, how do you track your electricity? And a very simple and effective tip, if you pay utilities, right? Just unplug your appliances, unplug everything, and you'll see the little bit of outcomes there. It's a little step, but it's impactful. And another little step is grow something in your, whether you have a pot, on your deck, or a little piece of land in the backyard, grow something and then eat it.
Angela, what are some actions anyone can take, or maybe more specifically, community organizations or others can take?
So I will mention something that I think is so pressing for us at the City of Chicago right now. We are in a moment this year where we are, pretty drastically transforming our energy system. We have a franchise agreement that's up for the first time in 30 years. We are working on our climate action plan, and we are working very hard to move the city to achieve our first 100% renewable energy goal by 2025 for the city's own municipal load. Each one of those decisions is an opportunity to engage with us. We've had a number of public meetings and have asked people for feedback and are engaging people on our social media. And we would love to continue that dialogue to people. The example in the film of the microgrid system may not work for us because we do have electricity running in folks' houses already, but we can certainly transition to systems like that over time, and bring about new opportunities to draw our energy from clean energy and renewable energy sources. And we very much would like to lead the city in that effort and want to hear back from people, and to engage people in how we can work collectively to reduce our energy consumption and make that transition. And I will just say our website very easily is chicago.gov/climate.
All right, so we're going to go to Jamie, and we're going to leave the final word with Dr. J. What are some actions people can take to be a part of the solution?
Vince, you asked us earlier about fact-based dreaming, and the film really highlighted that. Alicia earlier was quoting some of those facts and talking about buildings making up about 70% of the City of Chicago's carbon footprint. I think one of the actions people can take is making these abstract ideas about climate real by building that fact base. And I'd encourage people, sort of along the lines of what Oberlin was doing with that environmental dashboard, to take a look at Chicago or your city or another community's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and then and drill down where is the carbon coming from? 70% buildings, 25% transportation, and really drill down to connect those activities to your life and choices, and also to the systems that can either make it easier or harder for people to make good choices. Looking up a greenhouse gas emissions inventory is a great way to get smarter about where climate change is coming from, and it can lead right to tangible actions and build that fact base. And like the movie said, help move people from me towards we, and finding ways to shift institutions and companies to bring about the future that we'd like.
Dr. J, we'll leave it to you to take us home.
Okay. Well, I'm going to focus on the we and not the me. And what I would love to see is the challenge of all of us getting that we're sharing this beautiful blue dot, that we can fail not. And so therefore, we're going to have ecological relationships, where we say, okay, this is the strength that I can bring to the circle. This is how I need to be supported. This is how I can support. So all too common, we've been too much living in silos. And it's so important that we come out of those silos, whatever they are, and join hands, join life, intersect, weave, to make a 2040 possibility happen.
Well, personally, on behalf of myself, but also more broadly on behalf of the One Earth Film Festival and our audiences at home, thank each and every one of you for this fantastic panel discussion. This has been wonderful. Each of you are incredible panelists and leaders and inspiring change makers. I want to thank you specifically one by one. So thank you, Dr. Jefunza Wright-Carter. Thank you, Ms. Angela Tovar. Thank you, Jamie Ponce, as well as Alicia Ponce. We are now going to move on to our next slide, which will summarize some of the top actions submitted by our panelists and action partners. Some actions we talked about, but there are perhaps a couple new ones as well. So, as our panelists mentioned, we can start small by planting seeds, by gardening, by taking small steps to unplug our appliances or our other gadgets when they're not in use. We can think bigger about transforming our energy system and building resilience through decentralized energy production modes. Or we can approach this philosophically, transforming a me to a we to drive innovation through collaboration, grounding ourselves in ecological solutions that require all of us to join hands and work together. Other opportunities exist more broadly by connecting with nature. Developing a personal relationship with nature will create empathy and will create a stronger why that you can use to inspire others to take action with you to conserve our natural resources. We can live lightly on the earth, helping farmers, retrofitting our homes, drawing down our carbon, empowering women and girls to be the leaders and to be the change makers they were born to be. We can communicate with one another and learn from each other. Everybody has something to add. Everyone has a lived experience that makes them an expert in their particular field or their particular way of life. And we need to value that. And most of all, and most importantly, taking action requires us to use our voice. We may also be finding how we have been gifted with our talents and with our treasures and with our energies, but one thing we all have is a voice. So encourage others in your family, others in your friend group to consider issues on local, national, and global levels, and seek out information where you can find it and hold elected officials accountable to take a stand on key environmental justice issues. Invest and divest, donate and sponsor. These are all really great opportunities to move forward from this really stimulating conversation into some next steps. In the coming days, we will email you these take action points as well as a recording of this discussion. A transcript of the chat and full of ideas and other resources will be shared along with that too. And as we bring today's presentation to a close, I hope you felt called towards the One Earth Film Festival's 11-year theme of turning the tide. Please share in the chat as we wind down ways that you are ready to join in on turning the tide on our climate crisis. What do you feel compelled to do as a result of your participation as a viewer in this event? Our monitor will, at this point, keep track of some submissions, and I'll read them off as we go along. So again, what are some opportunities that you now feel compelled to pursue after participating in today's presentation? Okay, we have some coming in. I can see them now populating in our chat. All right. One example, I am ready to turn the tide by taking action on composting. That's a great example. We need to transform the soil if we were to transform the quality of our food. Susan mentions, I just put in a heat pump, so I will cut way back on gas consumption. Excellent. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, folks, we promised to get you out of here around 9 o'clock. So we're going to do our best to circle the wagons now that we're a little bit over time. But again, we want to thank each and every one of you on our panel, each and every one of you in our audience. Please, folks, at home, to learn more about our panelists and stay in touch with their work, see the links on this slide. Remember to tweet, post, or share about what you just experienced online and in social media. And if you found value in today's event, please donate to the One Earth Film Fest and join us again later this week during Earth Week in April and throughout the rest of the year. Lastly, one more huge thanks to each and every one of you for being here and participating. This is evidence that we have what it takes to turn the tide. So let's all give ourselves and our program participants one last round of applause. That brings today's presentation to a close. Thank you so much again for your time. Be safe, be well, and stay connected with one another. We'll see you later on in the fest, everyone.